I'm fortunate to know our presenter tonight, and I've known him for some time, but if you do not know Dan O'Connell, he is one of the experts in the Central Valley's history on land use, decision-making by landowners, corruption in agribusiness, and I'm forgetting a bunch of other things. Dan, we like to think of Dan as a climate advocate, but the truth of the matter is he's a land use expert, and there's nobody better that could be teaching the class tonight than Dr. Dan O'Connell. So please welcome Dan O'Connell, the Executive Director of the Central Valley Partnership.
Just to start off, a huge thank you to Dylan, Fresno City College, the State Federation of Teachers, the Social Justice Center that just launched in the last year. The Central Valley Partnership has been meeting here at the campus. We historically had met at labor union halls, but with the change in government that happened in November, we started to meet here in this very elegant space that's a public institution in the center of the city, close to students. Tonight's talk is on land justice. It's extremely close to my heart as a topic because I come from an Irish background. Also, I was thinking, what an opportunity. It's not just 3 minutes at a podium or writing a comment letter to an environmental impact statement. I had thought about having a few other folks join me, but at 57, I don't know how much more time I have. You might kick it tomorrow. So I wanted to take the time. I've been here maybe 20 years now. The research I had done historically is a critique of agribusiness, but I moved to Visalia and then to the inner city of Fresno, and there is multiple different geographies, and we're going to saunter across time and geographies today. East to west in the San Joaquin Valley are different geographies. So I've spent most of my time fighting sprawl developers, actually, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So land justice, we'll start now and take it where it is. This photograph was done for the Pan Valley Institute, the first Tamajavi Festival. It's 3 different panels done for the American Friends Service Committee. Tim Hernandez and Miro put it together. I think it's the best representation of the valley that I've ever seen. So, I wanted to put this into some sort of order. So these are the topic areas that I chose to use here. Life and balance. So we have reaped, which we'll discuss a little bit of the research, but not too much, because the core of what I want to talk to you today about is equity and conservation and land sharing. I've been pretty adamant recently about shifting the narrative away from land use, that we do land use policy, to land sharing, which is actually, if you even take that beyond human beings, we share it with other species as well. So land sharing rather than land use is something that I continue to want to reframe as the work intensifies now. There is an opportunity. It's a rough time in our country. There's opportunities making very clear what the politics of our country is, where is power situated, and there's an opportunity in this mess that I want to speak to today as well. And then finally, just a few short words on advice for moving forward, and I'm still figuring it out as you all are. Question to frame the evening. How can land policies promote racial justice, economic equity, and offer ways to restore democracy? And again, if you look at that, you're like, wow, that is a tough one to answer. We're going to make some progress today, and then I hope we have time to open it up. But we have been and will continue to organize along these lines. So I welcome you all to join both with the Central Labor Council and these Empowerment Institute events and the Central Valley Partnership, really a 501c3 arm of the labor movement. If we know our history, the worker struggle has been deep. It's institutionalized to a certain extent. We have a lot of lessons learned. just last week, just on Tuesday, we celebrated a very difficult contract at Fresno County for the in-home support service workers after a 10-year struggle. So we're making headway. So I wanted to also frame this around some issues that I've been thinking about. We've been doing a lot of political work. I would say in the last 10 years we've had pretty extraordinary success in the urban context of Fresno to flip the power structure about 180 degrees. From white Republican men that ran the place, sometimes with bizarre politics, to mostly people of color, women, the first LGBTQ elected council member, and people with a progressive agenda. Now, and in this talk, I want to begin to talk about a moral fight that I think is also going to be integrated. I think we can only go so far with political arguments, and I think there's a lot of morality in, especially in the intersection between labor and the environment. Second, I'll put these, we'll get to these in the presentation, the moral foundations, for instance. We'll just put a veneer on it, though. This is the most important one. Practical, historically grounded structures. So if we're talking about racial justice, we're talking about economic equity, we're talking about climate change. I learned when I was in sub-Saharan Africa as a Peace Corps volunteer in post-apartheid Namibia, working for the SWAPO government, who had just won an independence struggle, not to bring forward some idealistic vision of an idea that is not grounded. And a lot of the community development work, you want to bring forward practical solutions that are achievable. We're going to stretch to the edge of that, but everything we're going to talk to today is grounded historically. There's a few failures in there, but you can learn from the failures as well. This is nonviolent revolutionary praxis is, I think, the moment we're at. And I think we do need to talk about the word revolutionary. I think the unmasking of we're making racial progress in this country is off now. We still are witnessing the intense entrenchment of white supremacy and the potential for dramatic violence given the rhetoric of what's coming. And that could be also violence, that's state violence as well, unleashed on us, which we haven't seen. We, America, supported the overturn of the government, the Arbenz government in 54 in Guatemala, in 71 in Chile, in the 54 in Iran, and we reaped the consequences of these outcomes. Now, the chicken is really coming home to roost. Some of those dictators that we put in are mirroring the leadership that we now have. So, you know, it's, we have been arcing and supporting, we've been an empire more than we know, and that orientation of power and imperialism, which was grounded here on our conquests in North America, then projected globally, is coming back now. So I think we're at a moment where we talk about revolutionary action and challenging structures. And finally, the talk tonight is about geographies and the politicalization of geographies. Life and balance. So it's a bit of the morals of everything. When I was in Namibia, I lived with the Hambukushu, which were a pastoral people, planting a variant of sorghum. But I also lived near the San. And the San are hunter-gatherers from southern Africa. When you visit sites in Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, Zimbabwe, you see these enormous panels of artwork, similar to this. Often people following the animals. I did my homework and I did a little research. The top picture is Cedillo Hills in Botswana. It's in the Kalahari Desert, and you'll see it's a little bit more bushy there than the one below, which is the Namib Desert. The Cedillo Hills is covered with that rock art, covered with it. I treated it exactly like I was going to a spiritual place, which it is. The Okavango Delta is just to the east of this place, kind of like Ayers Rock. It just comes out of the desert. And the one at the bottom is the Bramberg. This is in the Namib Desert, much drier. Again, covered with these kind of paintings. A life in balance, something that we have arcing away from, especially with the advent of agriculture. We'll come back to the States, Chaco Canyon, northern New Mexico, I believe. I go as many times as I can. The balance, it's very similar to the Maya also. Those circles are kivas. This is Mesa Verde. These were intensely sophisticated agricultural and intellectual communities that knew astronomy like you can't believe and could set their clocks by it. And they actually designed the architecture of their places around it. The one on the left is up Dry Creek in Tulare County, Homer Ranch. Some of you know the one on the right. It's on the San Joaquin River near the Mother Tree. These are places that still, there's some mourning involved with returning to these places, but there's also a grounding on that morality. And one of the morality questions is, should land be commoditized? Should it be privately owned? And I think we need to return to some of these moral questions of, there's aspects of the life world that should not be the property, potentially, of an individual, especially on large land holdings or large. Now we have about 300 to 500 years of this land taking, seizures of the land. It's now embedded into the commodification of water. And if you want to ask the moral question, because these folks are so greedy, if they could, would they commoditize air? You need something to be, you need to be able to make it scarce, to make it valuable. So actually driving things to extinction make rhino horns more valuable. Hoarding land makes us all struggle to secure ourselves. So, but they would, you know the answer. If they could, they would commodify air. And they're in the process right now of commodifying water, because water is connected to land, and they've already well down this line. We'll talk about it in a little bit. These times to go to ancient people, and some of these tribes, their descendants are still here with us, especially of this picture. It's not only about remembrance, and it's not only about mourning, it's about setting the objects for the next fight. I come from an Irish background. Here you have two systems right behind each other. The enclosure of land is represented by those walls, and of course a Celtic circle. All of Ireland is covered with this. The Celts, the pagan folks there, likely matriarchal, earth-centered. This isn't that long ago, by the way. I'm going to shift to the book in the struggle. Donna's in the back there sitting with some copies. The biblical reference here, So We Have Reaped, has to do with the first chapter in the book, which is based on research that was done in the San Joaquin Valley by somebody named Walter Goldschmidt, who compared the city of Arvin and Dinuba to determine whether federal law should be implemented. That law, the Reclamation Law of 1902, embedded in that law was a land reform. The law stipulated, it's in 1902, so in 1902, Teddy Roosevelt and Howard Taft were presidents. They were progressives, at least on an economic sense. They're going to bring water to the western United States. The state's almost a dividing line right in the middle, and water decreases in the west. We have some rivers, the Colorado, San Joaquin Kings, others. The law is going to build infrastructure, dams and canals. And the law is embedded with progressive values. Those were, if you are going to receive publicly subsidized, inexpensive water from the federal government, you need to do 3 things. You need to live on the land that's going to receive the water. Your farm has to be 160 acres or less, and if you're married, it was 320 acres. And after 10 years, if you had a farm above 160 acres, you had to sell all land in excess of 160 acres at pre-water prices. It's a voluntary whether you want to sign this. If you sign it, that's the agreement. So after 10 years, the law stipulated a land reform because the land, going back to 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the Spanish land grants were held. A series of droughts and panics or depressions hit in 1870s and 90s, all of those consolidating land. Already the San Joaquin Valley was horrendously unequal when they brought water to the place. So within this law, this was the law, the dams were built, they signed the contracts, and there the story begins. The government didn't want to implement its own law. So it hired a Federal Bureau of Agricultural Economics, which was as big as the cooperative extension system in some states at that time, to do the research. Should small farms be favored over large farms? Should land reform happen? Is this a just law? A very simple case study comes forward by Walter Goldschmidt, done in about 1944. He had done his PhD dissertation out of Berkeley on the city of Wasco, which was a community study, so he's walking into the valley already understanding a lot of its context. Paul Taylor, always good to start with the region, huh, beforehand? I'll get to Paul Taylor in a moment. Oh, there's Paul Taylor. Here. This is Tipton, Visalia, right in the middle of the delta. Fresno is right up here somewhere. This is all wetlands. One of these, the city of Alpa, was a historic island on the lake. So when you go to Alpa, you can just imagine, this here says something like 687 square miles. It was big enough that when you flew a plane across, some people were confused, thinking it was the ocean. Paul Taylor. Paul Taylor was the mentor of Walter Goldschmidt. Higher ed is hierarchical. You hope to get somebody with values and a friend on top of you to guide your way. He was the dissertation chair of sorts of Walter Goldschmidt. Paul Taylor suggested that the comparison of the two cities, they should choose Firebaugh or Mendota and compare it to Dinuba. The government refused that because they thought the differences would be so dramatic people wouldn't believe it. They chose Arvin in Kern County, very similarly, and Arvin was surrounded by some of the biggest farms, so similar comparison. Dinuba had twice the retail sales of Arvin. Numbers of churches, numbers of newspapers, doctors, sidewalks, poverty, number of workers that are owning their business and not. Everything, the small town, the small farmers were acting as entrepreneurs and buying their goods in town. Money was circulating in the community. The big town, the large corporate kind of oriented one, the people are living on the coast or in Los Angeles, the Resnicks today, or in major corporate centers. Now we're having, private equity come in and buy our farms. God knows where they live. They do not live in the towns where the farming is happening, and that is detrimental, both to the civic life and the social life of the community, because those entrepreneurs that are either small entrepreneurs in town or small farmers outside of town are also problem solving in a pretty dramatic way. They feel vested in their society, they're citizens at least. They can argue for their rights, they can make a stand in their positions. A company town doesn't have those. It doesn't have the resilience to defend democracy. I love this picture. That's Dorothea Lange. the photographer of the Dust Bowl and the Japanese internment, of sharecropping in the American South. And Paul Taylor and Dorothea Lange were both critical of latifundia, which they associated with Rome, first of all. As Rome grew from a republic, they conquered lands, and those lands they came in and gave to larger and larger landholdings, and the republic arced to an empire. Sound familiar? Latifundia is also a word associated with Central America and South America. Same system happens with serfs, peasants, indentured servants, or slaves working the land to a feudal kind of orientation. As opposed to latifundia, these two spoke of agrarian democracy. He was so crazy in love with her, and she is making it so hard on him right now. I love this picture because she's like seducing him, and he was really, he promoted her above himself, and he knew she is one of the great talents. Both his writing, I'd be in Cornell and squirreled away in a corner of a library in the middle of the night, and I'd be reading his oral histories, and I'd start crying, and her photos have the same effect on me. Very rare, well, I'm a little emotional, but that's, and then that they were so in love in a project together. Their project is our project. You don't know it. To save democracy. And if you're going to have a democracy, you need equity. And if you're going to have equity, you need to break the one leverage point that this system keeps using. It's telling white people to take the teeniest little incremental idea that they're better and having them assimilate to that rather than the enormous benefits like public health, free education, et cetera, of a more shared economy. So we're still about the project that these two were doing. So when I say democracy, it always equates to equity. A radical equity, by the way. The more equitable, the better. And this proves true. Costa Rica is better than El Salvador. El Salvador, where 10 families own 90% of the arable land, and the Arena Party is slaughtering people, raping nuns, and killing archbishops. There's no army in Costa Rica, more equitable place, but you can go to Europe to really see the difference between them and our own country, right? Have you been to Belgium or Sweden? You'll see an equitable society, a socialism. It's the role of government in society. Don't let them fool you about that. Socialism is just, Marines are socialists. The police are socialists. We pay them. So here is the Arvind Danuba study that I was just telling you about. What's interesting about the study, and its biblical forewarning, and we, by the way, are living in the moment that they were warning us about. As you sow is a foreshadow of this moment, so you shall reap. The Goldschmidt hypothesis. Science can put you on the moon. It works best, maybe, with physics, a little bit or a lot more awkwardly in social contexts. I always appreciate the kind of anarchism of anthropologists, right? These are ag economists and rural sociologists, and they're going to use numbers to prove their case. And I was really skeptical of quantitative measures until I saw the potency of them. And this book will show you that. And how is it illustrated? It can be illustrated in multiple different ways. But here's the Goldschmidt hypothesis. An equitable economy is, I can't get away from using this word, a requisite condition. You have to have it. You have to have equity if you're going to have a democracy. You have to have equity. And then the other one, the kicker, is it's a measurable outcome. You can measure poverty in multiple different ways, and they do in this book. What happens when the study came out and Danuba was way better than Arvind? What did the government do? It immediately censored it. Immediately, boom. And a statistical analysis that was going to be much more rigorous, which means much more potent and strong statistics rather than the case study, was suppressed. For 30 years, suppressed. So you you can start playing with these measures of equity as it's represented and connecting it to democracy, and you could do that in multiple different ways. Dean McCannell, I just had the joy of being with him up in Sacramento for a podcast interview. He did the retest. The University of California was implicated in the industrialization of agriculture. The Farm Bureau was housed at UC Berkeley for 30 years, a huge subsidy. During the Braceros program, the cooperative extension system analyzed where there was labor shortages and sent the Braceros to those areas. The tomato harvester, all of the technology that the university was producing, publicly funded research was being privatized immediately. At a moment of opportunity when Jimmy Carter was president and Jerry Brown, the first one, was governor, and I'm forgetting the name, but the chancellor of the university was conducive to this research moving forward, the state legislature funded McCannell to do a Goldschmidt retest. That suppressed statistical study he does. The first one was going to compare 25 towns in the valley, and Walter Goldschmidt was going to do it. I don't think Walter Goldschmidt, who was an anthropologist, was going to do a good job. Dean McCannell is brilliant. And he did regression statistical analysis of 83 towns. Then he followed that up with an analysis of the communities in the Westlands Water District. And finally, he did a study of the 100 largest ag counties in the 4 states, the Sunbelt states of Arizona, California, Texas, and Florida. The findings from the Arvind Dainuba study were overproven. They were excelled the first findings. So they were validated. And then we have to ask the question, because our hypothesis sounds a little iffy. Is it true? I don't know. We're still figuring that one out. Oh, by the way, Dean McCannell, same thing. All night long, big ag people calling him, threatening him, threats on his life. And the backstory of all this was not able to be told by these guys during their lifetimes, but after they're retired and they have me sit down with a recorder right in front of them, I got the stories in the book. The coercion and threats, and a lot of these folks, some of the people around them lost their jobs. They are an added level of validation to the quantitative findings that they were validating that equity is necessary for a democracy. I think it was Levi Strauss that once came to Davis, and McCannell was there, and he told me this story, and a student asked him, what's the greatest threat to humanity? The answer? Monoculture. But that word, which is an ecological word in my head, it's actually conducive also to human societies. We want diversity. We want diversity. That is strength. Diversity is strength socially. It's strength economically. You do not want monopoly. You do not want consolidation. It looks like feudalism or worse. You don't want monopoly. And this is an almond orchard just planted down below where nothing grows except almonds. And, coming from my background, there was 4 varieties of potatoes that were being planted, and they stole all of the land. We were on little teeny acreage. A fungus hit. They let the folks starve in Ireland, huh? They were exporting food at the time as well. Capitalism. Famines occur when democracy isn't present as well. Another very important point. So, equity and democracy prove a certain resilience, both culturally and for our community well-being. So, this is why it's the revolutionary moment. We know this now. And by the way, if somebody wants to contest this, 100 years of research, and we walk into these towns, right? We walk into the towns. But go do the research. Prove a counter theory. But right now, I think we have a theory that equity and diversity are conducive to democracy. McCannell told me, Dan, everything we did can be done now with GIS. And during the time here, this came out. Do you know this, Cal EnviroScreen? Who knows this? This is a map done by the state of California. It guides policy. What is it doing? It's comparing two things, economic outcomes and environmental hazards, so pollution, poverty. So the place that's lit up in bright red is the most productive food-producing region in the history of the world. Because we live in a capitalist society where you have to have money to buy food, the incredible, immoral paradox is that the actual farmers that we drove off land in central Mexico, or were forced here out of wars we were causing in Southeast Asia, the actual farmers, we call them farm workers, which is a completely racialized word for the real farmers. Those are the hungriest people. The farmers are going hungry here. The enormous immorality of it. We've grown so used to it, we don't say it. Look at the bright red. Look at that. That area was once a Serengeti-like ecosystem with the largest lake west of the Mississippi. We completely distorted the entire place. Geographies, the paradoxes and politics of geographies. We made this. Let's go. The Goldschmidt-McCannell hypothesis theory is talking about economics and a certain civic life. But now we know the ecological outcomes of what these very greedy handful of people are doing. This area here is total subsidence from 2015 to 2021. Notice how close, when you're looking at this lake, and the weird irony of that poverty and pollution, and then, voila, the ground table sinking hundreds of feet where there was once a lake. Whoa. 20-year groundwater trend. Look at where it's bright red. This is happening in the Midwest now too as well, by the way. The model of what happened, the as you sow of California, has now hitting the Midwest. We'll get to it in a minute. Before we do, though, I want to comment on the Westlands Water District. But they are indicative of a system of water districts. Water districts are special districts. They're created by the state of California. They're a form of government. The Westlands Water District, how do they do their voting? Oh, this is the west side. So Huron, this is just past Mendota. Huron is the only incorporated city, so they're reliant on the county board of supervisors to support them, these folks out here. This is Cantua Creek, this is El Porvenir, this is 5 Points. Almost no one on the land also, a bizarrely weird landscape of monocropped and then nothing, and just enormous, no houses, no churches. Voting in the Westlands Water District is done not by one person, one vote, but by the dollar value of acres you own is the number of votes you get. That was passed that was supported by the U.S. Supreme Court Rehnquist in 1983. Oh, one last thing about the agrarian democracy and as you sow. The law was never followed. After 10 years, no one sold the land that they had in excess of 160 acres. So what you would do, you would sue. You would sue the government. In 1958, Ivanhoe versus McCracken, Paul Taylor wrote the Yale Law Review article that a 9-0 decision that supported the arguments of a 9-0 decision by the U.S. Supreme Court upholding reclamation values. Residency, acres limitation, redistribution of land after 10 years. 9-0 Supreme Court decision. Did it change anything? Nada. In fact, we start getting a forecasting of what's happening now with a complete, I don't care about the law, from the executive that's supposed to be implementing it. The Westlands Water District is this system of California water districts. They're not the only one, but they're the biggest. 600,000 acres, getting free water, and they squeal. They won't let you have health care. They won't give health care to their workers, let alone, to a certain extent, food. But they will take welfare from the government with very inexpensive water and technology and crop insurance. Well, that's mostly in the Midwest, but they get a lot of subsidies. There was 2 lawsuits, that one in 1958. Who knew Elfie Ballas? This guy is from Minnesota, first of all, I think. Wisconsin, Minnesota. Elfie came out to the Valley. He worked as the editor for the labor newspaper, for the Labor Federation. But he evolved. He was very close friends with Dorothea Lange, who taught him photography, and Elfie Ballas is a photographer. Many of the pictures you see of Cesar Chavez marching, if you look, George Ballas. He also did documentary films, and he was tutored by Paul Taylor. So Paul Taylor and Dorothea Lange both mentored him. Imagine that. It's such a blessing. And then he brought it. This fairly small elfin Midwesterner who was a Marine and a football player brought it. He sued the Department of Agriculture on reclamation again, and he won. You think it's all going to win, right? And he had the capacity to implement because he had a whole network of people he had organized in Fresno and the entire southern San Joaquin Valley. They legalized the crime. They win the lawsuit about, I think, 78, something like that. By 1980, the 2 Democratic state senators of California start waffling. Reagan is elected. And by 1982, they basically, after 40 years of law breaking, of getting free public subsidy, again, these are the people who criticize all of us when we get any sort of menial crumbs off the table from the government. These people who are getting tons of subsidies from the US government, they basically legalized the crime, and it all went away. This is National Land for the People. That is the organization Elfie created. Notice this subtitle here. Oops. The land belongs to those who work it. It's from the Mexican Revolution, huh? The land belongs to those who work it. It's so intuitively right. And belongs, we'll let that float a little bit. A vestedness. There's systems in Mexico, which you get to later. And here, my good friend Johnny, who was in the last chapter of the book, who was a young CRLA lawyer, environmental activist, environmental justice activist, still here, works for a community water center. She found George Ballas used to bring busloads of people to the west side on reality tours. People, progressive, rich people, huh? And others. And then he'd roll out this map that showed all the ownership. These are because of the railroads to a certain extent, huh? When they got those lands. Let's finish off this anomaly of the San Joaquin Valley where the land was already fairly largely consolidated and then continued to be consolidated, continued to thwart the law. Due to a certain set of circumstances that you, if you're cynical, were saying they maybe baited these folks, but a lot of farmers in the Midwest by the 1970s went into debt on trying to farm hedgerow to hedgerow. As Earl Butz said, the Secretary of Agriculture, get big or get out. And then interest rates went to 15, 17%, and the bankruptcies and suicides incurred. And here we see from 1978 to 2017, the consolidation of land in the Midwest. Again, 1978 to 2017. These states, Wisconsin, Minnesota, South Dakota once elected socialists. When these were all small farmers, the most progressive senators were from Minnesota and Wisconsin. Look at the politics of this place today. Look at the politics now. Once you drive, once the economy starts cratering into these consolidated monopolies, people not only don't stay in the communities, they leave. They lose their narrative. They start struggling to understand what's going on in their lives. They move to the easy solution, weird religious ideas, and worse yet, reaction. Blame immigrants, blame trans people. Why aren't you blaming the person who stole your parents' land? That's the person, right? And and oftentimes not a person. I was an activist for years, before Peace Corps, years. Anti-war environmental work. It wasn't working. The protesting wasn't working. I thought after I came back from Namibia that I'd just go back. I was put to such good use there. I was busy every day helping people. And at the end of my time, 2 years goes fast at UC Davis, I had done an ethnography of how social segregation was functioning in a rural town, not unlike here. It was the town of Knights Landing. And I also saw the intense pride of the immigrant community in trying to strive to get ahead. The subtitle of the thesis was, allá somos ricos, aquí somos pobres. It was a young child asking their parents, why are we rich in Mexico and poor here? And the parents were middle class in Mexico. They chose to come here for their children. These anomalies and weird narratives and opportunities. The agricultural system in the San Joaquin Valley needed labor. Braceros first. After Braceros ends in 1963, for the next decade or two, they just allow folks in and encourage them to be residents here. It changed the entire framework of the valley. How rich we are now. How rich. This place is going to be great coming up. We're changing it now. It started in the city of Fresno. We're going to move. Los Angeles used to be one of the most reactionary cities in the United States, as was Minneapolis. Both Minneapolis, all women of color, progressives. The Los Angeles Board of Supervisors, as far as I last checked, all women of color, progressive, like a few years ago. That's coming here. That's coming here. We're going to win this. They just unmasked themselves to be so not worthy of governing. We're not just going to be quiet about it. So at the end of this, at the end of my master's thesis, As You Sow was given to me. As You Sow was given to me. And I was like, oh, the U.S. government knew what was going to go on. They censored it. They suppressed this information. How is that possible? I think especially white guys are super naive. So much privilege, and you need to go look. I was pissed. I just simmered. And I go, oh. And I knew that previous scholars that had gone to Berkeley to research this question, usually in solidarity with farm workers, some of them weren't allowed to finish their PhDs. So I didn't trust the University of California. I went to Cornell, which is also, it's an Ivy League and a land grant, so I get 2 for 1. The prestige and the democracy. Supposed democracy, we need to reclaim land grants. The title is a little different. Pedagogies of Politically Engaged Scholarship in the San Joaquin Valley of California. Pedagogies, do many people know it? If you've read Freire, maybe. But let's just call it what it is. Scholars in the Fight Against Industrial Agribusiness in California. The book came home. We got a big box. I'm walking up. 20 years of work. And sometimes being a scholar, you're just completely isolated. Alone, writing, you're with people, you're with ideas, but it's solitary. So it feels good, especially when you deliver something that can be useful. The editor made me change one thing. The first quote in the preface, I said, this book is designed as ammunition They thought it was too heavy. So now I changed it to, this book aims to be useful like a guidebook as it maps a battlefield arcing across 4 generations of organizing and research. Okay, a little bit more bland, but the title, huh? In the struggle. And that's where scholars should be. You know Antonio Gramsci, the Italian communist scholar, in the 1920s, fighting Mussolini. When Mussolini came after him, the prosecutor said at Gramsci's trial, "We want to stop this brain from working for the next 20 years. That's a compliment. Huh? So I get the book, go. My next door neighbor, Latino, she's a healthcare worker, and he's a forklift driver. Come out, it's my book. It's arrived. They look at it, what's it about? Now I have to do a lot of translating in my head, because you can't use the word pedagogy. Why? I just asked her, why are poor people poor? And I told this story in the e-blast that went out today, and her answer, drugs. Isn't that the ultimate answer the system wants you to answer? Blame the victim, or pick the vulnerable and annihilate them to deflect people, trans, immigrants. We know that guy went down the escalator and called immigrants rapists. We know that they're the hardest working, most dedicated family people in our society. I realize now that 300 pages of hearing, I put it in the first person voice of the scholars themselves, so it's not just me telling you this, it's them. Still, it's a heavy lift. So you can do somebody's homework for them, but they still have to learn it. I wanted to read Paul Taylor first, just to get a flare here. Because it's also, this is Paul Taylor. Remember this context. So you shall reap. This isn't Taylor, this is Galarza. We're getting to him later. Paul Taylor. He's probably giving an oral history interview. I don't know whether we'll ever make it or whether we won't, or whether they are going to rivet us on this monopoly of land perpetuated with a monopoly of water. At the time, it was a monopoly of land, and they were trying to take the water. That now has happened. So we are past this. We are in the moment he's saying. It is going to be very bad if that program goes clear through to the end. It's going to be very bad. We're in the very bad. We were discussing the water situation, reclamation. I would read to you right now what Theodore Roosevelt said in 1911 before the Commonwealth Club. He warned the, quote, very wealthy men he was addressing that ruin, quote, ruin that they would bring upon themselves if they pursued exactly the course they're pursuing today. I think a heavy price is paid both within the academic world and outside, because instead of emphasizing forethought to avoid problems, we wait until the problems hit us in the face and then try to figure out what to do. The land monopolists have controlled the enforcement of reclamation law and torn the law to ribbons. What bothers them is that controls over speculation and monopoly are still the law. They hadn't legalized the crime yet. They haven't been able to wipe them off the statute books yet. That came. So they know they are in an uncertain, perhaps even precarious position, violating the law. They know it, but they keep the knowledge from spreading widely to the public. Now you know it. It's there. Let's move on from research, because we're going to shift geographies. But I wanted to come back to the reality isn't just how you see it. It's created also. Geographies, by definition, are designed. The environment is intentionally and purposely shaped by human agency. And a shift now. I came here to cause trouble for agribusiness. Good trouble. Good trouble. I ended up living in Visalia, and I ended up being the first farmland conservation director at Sequoia Riverlands Trust. We'll get to that in a minute. Above us, tomorrow I'll be in Kings Canyon camping. They're the highest level of protection above us. What would it look like? And that was a big fight that we'll reference briefly today. How do we bring the same level of care to the valley floor that is held by a very few, major portions of it are owned by a very few very powerful people, and the rest of us struggling to get along with each other and organize to push back from the limited positions of power we have. If we work together, we have enormous power, though, by the way. So can we envision such a project? And I started puzzling that. Where are we at currently? So I wanted to start off with a map that's not cut up into nation states and states. This is probably nothing close to the diversity. We even know the tribes that were here, which are broadly called Yokuts, there was many different sub-tribes there. The ceding of land, how fast it happened. How fast? Incredible, like a cancer, huh? Almost exactly like a cancer. I'm doing research out in western Minnesota now, and I saw a plaque in the middle of the prairie near a stream, and it just was the only thing there. I stopped and read it. In 1862, the Dakota rose up, and there was a school here. The teacher was killed. Imagine how frustrated you are to have this violence start happening. Imagine the violence that you would witness, not only against your peoples, but against your entire epistemological lifeway. These people are like a cancer taking the land. If they could, they would own the air, right? That's the equivalent for native peoples. That land should never be torn away like it was. And then the slaughters that happen of the buffalo and others. Imagine the mourning, the anger, and the waves of emotion. And then these little flare-ups. So this played out in a bazillion little ways like this. Still is happening. We are going to have to work through healing as we organize together to resist. And we all come from different places. That's the project. It's going to be a heavy lift, especially for white people. I'm always telling myself to. Central Valley, same map, except the entire thing. It was an inland sea at one time. Federal lands in California. So I have a cheat sheet. Dylan wanted me to talk, or mention a few times I was going to talk about, and I wanted to reference, because right now our public lands are going to be threatened. Literally, the federal government, 50% of the state of California is owned by the federal government. So national parks, Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service. Here's a bit of the history that happened in the formation of the parks. 1864, the federal government, this is Bill Tweed, who was the lead interpretive ranger of Sequoia. It was such an honor to know him. I phoned him called him up and said, hey, I can't find this quick enough. Can you just give me a cheat sheet? Here's the history of the public lands. Tulare County, half of the county is in the public lands. How many people go up there? 1864, the federal government creates Yosemite Grant, a state park containing Yosemite Valley and the Mariposa Grove of Sequoias. 1864. 1890, Congress creates Sequoia National Park. It was a result of people in Tulare County, especially the farmers, wanting to protect their watershed, and of George Stewart, an attorney and editor of the Visalia Delta. Sometimes one person can play an instrumental role in changing history. 1890, October 1st, Congress creates 2 more national parks in the Sierra. Yosemite National Park surrounds the state park, and the federal and state parks were merged in 1906. So Yosemite was largely created through advocacy of people in the Bay Area, especially John Muir, and eventually that conglomeration of people created the Sierra Club. But the other national parks were more local. The General Grant National Park, originally 4 square miles, just covering the Grant Tree. The bill, a few weeks later, Sequoia National Park is tripled in size, and the giant forest is added to the park. Management of all 3 parks were assigned to the Department of Interior. Beginning in 1891, federal troops provided protection, including African American rangers, soldiers. The politics behind the bill are complicated. The campaign for Yosemite was led by Bay Area people. A movement for Sequoia enlargement in the General Grant Park, pushed quietly by Daniel Zumwalt, a Pacific Railroad lobbyist, resident of Tulare, who was visiting D.C. at the time. It's not just national parks up there, it's a park service, the forests as well. 1893, President Benjamin Harris designates Sierra Forest Reserve. It contains all forested lands in central and southern Sierra not already in national parks or previously sold. Bold, broad local support to protect the watershed was instrumental, especially for irrigation for farmers. The management was minimal. In 1906, the forest reserves were turned into national forests. The U.S. Forest Service was created. The Southern Sierra becomes the Sierra, Sequoia, and Inyo National Forests. Better management of the lands ensues. I'm involved now in a project that the state of California is leading globally, 30 by 30. In the era of climate change, biodiversity, so protecting these ecosystems, is probably the easiest thing you can do to insulate us from the shock that's coming with climate change. So California, this is a global initiative. The Biden administration was backing this, but California will likely achieve the conservation of biodiversity-rich areas, 30% of the land and water in California, including the coast. The goal is to achieve this by 2030, and we're coming close. So on a sub-state level, along with places like Quebec and other sub-nation states, we're going to get really close to this. And I'm really proud of the state for moving forward with this. In the documents prior to this, they had broken up the state of California into regions, and it was very interesting. They're looking at biodiversity. There's 2 maps here. This one is land use, not sharing. The orange is in agriculture. This is biodiversity, with the light orange being extremely low. Again, monoculture, the threat, the collapse of ecosystems, everything's integrated. So if you sever these things, if you take out the bees, this dies, everything is interconnected. And so the entire web of life starts collapsing in on of itself. You can understand why the Dakota were so angry. The San Joaquin Valley was already privately owned. We're going to start from the remnant margins to try to conserve the place. The Great Valley Center, which was a major nonprofit here a few years ago, it's not really existing anymore. It was integrated into UC Merced and kind of lost its purpose. Carol Whiteside, a Republican, moderate Republican, was the leader of it. They had a role in starting a land trust in northern and southern San Joaquin Valley. The northern one is now called the California Farmland Trust, and Sequoia Riverlands Trust is in the south. I was working for Sequoia Riverlands Trust. I started going to conferences. I had no idea what a land trust was. What a handy little institution. It's a nonprofit charged with conserving, owning, stewarding land. And there's radical variants of that. I have to go faster so we can get to some of this. Nature preserves are where you see it most likely. This is remember Visalia is in the Kaweah River Delta. Kaweah Oaks Preserve is a nature preserve in that. So if you want to see what that looked like in the past, it's not even close, but some variant of these massive valley oak trees, this is a cool place to go, and I recommend it. I did the first conservation easement with a farmer in both Kern and Tulare County. In Kern County with a large farmer, which I'm proud of, and in Tulare County with Paul Buxman and Ruth, plein air artist. He sued Devon News with me. This is his house, Sweet Home Ranch. On Thanksgiving, they have this open house with all of his art and all these baked goods from all the Mennonite farmers. I highly recommend anyone can go. I did my work there. I did a conservation easement in Fresno, Tulare, Kings, and Tulare. Kern, Tulare, Kings, and Fresno. One easement with a farmer in each of those. Now, Sequoia Riverlands Trust works in 8 counties. I think they have like 20,000 acres, 40,000. You start small and you build from there. We'll get to that later. American Farmland Trust, I start working for them as their program manager in the San Joaquin Valley. Notice, first of all, this was my go-to map. This was my go-to map. Notice how a conservationist, this is a geography also, they're telling you something. Their mission is to save farmland, save prime farmland. Prime farmland is the bright green. The bright green. Where did they put the cities? Where there was good water, where there was good soil, just on the east side of the valley. Fresno, Visalia. Centerville was actually a bigger city than Fresno back then. Now these cities are exploding out in sprawl development. And the land in the light green there's salts, less water availability, still sometimes good soil quality, but other barriers to farming long term. So this was the project. But I also wanted, the urban areas are just blank and white. This is how I think a person that wants to think on landscape level and is desperate to save humanity from a pending climate crisis will just run over, not looking, not asking the local communities, what do you want? And this isn't going to be easy land to get back from the people that have it. The price of land, $30,000 an acre. It's still a worthwhile endeavor. I set out to become a policy advocate. So it's nice this isn't a policy series. I had, by this time, knew what land trusts were. I didn't know what a general plan was. Do people know what a general plan of a city or county is? A general plan for a city or a county is the economic constitution, and you should fight over your constitutions, especially the ones that tell you where they're going to grow and not grow. At this time, the second Brown administration is passing, actually Schwarzenegger started, kudos to him. California's environmental, I'm skipped, the climate policies, AB 32 and SB 375. SB 375 was connecting land use to transportation. So let's not create freeways out to nowhere. Let's invest in bus rapid transit, maybe light rail, high-speed rail, bike routes, walking to school, safe walking to school. I also learned about the California Environmental Quality Act. It took me a decade to learn how to put a lawsuit together. When Visalia broke their word on their general plan, I warned them that they have to follow procedure and do an EIR and follow this environmental impact report. They didn't. The Sierra Club and my organization sued them, and we won, setting a precedent also that farmland is a resource that should be mitigated for. Mitigation. Under California Environmental Quality Act, if you destroy a wetland, you need to conserve wetlands somewhere else. The law doesn't make any sense because there's only so many places a wetland can be, but it's an effort. Farmland. Generally, if you destroy 1 acre of farmland, you need to conserve it with a conservation easement, which basically says you can have all the rights associated with you as a property owner except the right to develop. We'll purchase that and we're going to hold it as a land trust. That, 1-to-1, means we'll lose 50% of the land in the valley, but we haven't, to this day, after 15 years, we still don't have this policy, the most modest policy you can imagine. These developers are so greedy, and they pay off politicians for the tiniest amount of money. Or there's the prestige to hang out with a rich person. I don't know what it is, but you're selling away your city. Urban growth boundaries. CEQA, right now, Senator Wiener and the governor are likely to gut the California Environmental Quality Act, so we better get prepared to fight on new ground. A big loss. It's a moment of big losses, but it's like keep taking punches and get ready. Urban growth boundaries are the solution. Let's take the decision away from the politicians. An urban growth boundary, this is Ventura County. Listen, this is important. Urban growth boundary is you need a 50% vote of the people of the city if any land is going to be annexed. Ventura County, the land values are way higher than Fresno County, and each of the 8 incorporated cities and the county itself has urban growth boundaries. So when have the people voted to take in annexed land? When they needed a hospital. But it's not this open sprawl. Wait until I show you SEDA in a moment. What's happening now, the threat to our city if you live in Fresno. This happened. Urban growth boundaries are commonly used. We need them here because you can't trust the politician and it doesn't have to do with political party. We'll see. Right now you're going to witness this. You're going to see who has character on the city council. The mayor has already shown his hand. We're making progress though. San Joaquin River. There's little nuggets up there. I found it during the pandemic. I would go find that, everyone's staying inside, good, I'm gonna go. I found epic valley oak trees and I would just sit in the grass there and not wear a mask. And you should go. I'm on the board of the San Joaquin River Conservancy, a state agency that collaborates with the San Joaquin River Parkway and Conservation Trust, which is a land trust. They are working in collaboration along with another tons of cool community groups. This is going to be a very special place. So keep on trying to pay attention, visit and care about the policies around it, always being threatening a new town in Friant. So everything to this point is conventional land trusts. The Nature Conservancy, regional land trusts like Sequoia Riverlands Trust, American Farmland Trust. These are conservation land trusts. There's only so far they're going to go. In fact, a conservation easement, you purchase the development right for somebody that has a lot of land. So if they want to stay in farming, you're paying them, and they usually you're paying a person with a lot of land to save that land. I would prefer I think that's important, but I also want investments going to the farm worker communities. In fact, if I had my way, Martin Luther King talked about socialism for the rich, which you heard about the big agribusiness. It's socialism for the rich. It's capitalism for the poor. And you only have to look at the prices that people in Cantua Creek or El Porvenir are paying for their water that they can't drink. Obscenity, water that you can't drink. And they're paying way more. They barely will trust taking a shower in it. Once they took it and put a glass in front of it when I was visiting. It was brown. And I was just curious. I took a tiny sip. Everyone in the house, stop! It was like I was drinking pure cancer. I just did a little sip. But that reaction to their own water, that they pay incredible amounts of money for. They have to go big bottles and buy their water. So the poorest people are paying the most. That is the morality, the immorality of the system. So me, frustrated as all hell, witnessing it all, wanting to do more, ask the question, how can we better integrate equity and racial justice into conservation practice and objectives and outcomes? This map. There was an intern from the Bren School that was working for me at Sequoia Riverlands Trust, and we were in a partnership with other major statewide and national conservation organizations, but they were locally centered. I won't name names. I said, let's do a conservation priorities map, not only mapping the biodiversity and the prime farmland that we want to conserve, but proximity to people. And again, many of the communities are on top of very important places, but most important, they live there. So this map came up. It combines urban density, the closest you are to a density of people, to those ecological and conservation values. You'll see how the brightest blue is surrounding the cities and the rivers. I was not allowed to release this map. I was not allowed to release the map. It was deemed too politically hot a decade or two ago. I knew my time was limited there then, because you can't stop the truth, right? And if you can't name it in a map, it's not going to happen. The investments aren't going to come. Let's talk land use or abuse. Los Angeles, 1916. My grandfather was born at this time in Canada. I was born in 67 here in Inglewood. There's Watts, there's Gardena, Compton, Fullerton, Anaheim, Orange. I grew up down here in Irvine. There's Garden Grove, Los Alamitos. All little farm towns. 1916. Wow. Wow, how fast that went. Fresno, 1936. It's the middle of the Great Depression. Look at these folks. Fulton Street. Notice this. Trams, electric trams. I live 1 block away from Huntington Boulevard. There was a tram that went up Huntington Boulevard. Now it's a grass strip. That's the coolest thing ever. Look at the vitality of Fresno in the Great Depression. Okay, we know this. Fulton Street, today. It might have been a Sunday. I hope it's not a Tuesday. Good God. These are market mechanisms that are infused with this kind of white flight racism that's also a discourse of whiteness. Clovis being the best school district, that is a racist statement. Like, whoa. Memorizing things and having uniforms, I don't buy it. Critical education is empowering education. It's hard when your school district is solving for problems like hunger and homelessness. At the same time, you're trying to educate people, and sometimes they don't speak English. This pattern of sprawl is devastating to our urban communities. When they open up these new exterior regions, the capital, both public investment and private, flows to them. That's why River Park is the way it is and Manchester is the way it is. In fact, just go up Blackstone Boulevard and look at the major malls. Manchester was once the coolest place. And then Fashion Fair, River Park. Watch this. You ready? Maps tell stories. Maps tell stories. Boom. City of Fresno general plan update. They produce maps as well. I take the maps that are most meaningful to me. Pattern of growth, the city growing out. This is the historic core of the city. I have another map to show it again. Watch this. This is the city of Fresno with Ashley Swearingen, who was an economic development specialist. She had integrity on quite a few issues, especially land use and economics, especially with the general plan. Educational attainment. 53 to 69% of the percentage of people, I think, not getting their high school degree. Poverty. Extreme poverty, 40% or more here. I live in there too. Watch this. See the pattern? They're just gutting us. The oversupply of these very unaffordable houses that are being built in Copper River and other places that you're not buying, that they're going to tell you they need to buy it because of affordable housing. No. And they are going to tax you to build infrastructure for those rich people, by the way. Capitalism for the poor, socialism for the rich. Pattern. And so here's another historic growth pattern that's similar to the first map. And this is, up until this point, it's about like 1950. And then boom, boom, just an unleashing of this land grab. At this moment, they're going to crater the economic integrity and all the other pieces that go with the economy right now. The Southeast Development Area, 9,000 acres, mostly between Sanger and the city of Fresno, is being proposed at this moment. On yesterday, Wednesday, the Planning Commission was filled with people. Maybe some of you were there. Filled. We're going to defend our city. We're going to defend our city. We're going to defend our city. We need to win this. SEDA. This is kind of representation of what it's like now. These are the kind of scale of farming you want. 60, 20 acres, 120, some rural folks, this is what they want to build here. A new town, 45,000 homes, hundreds of thousands of people. Why aren't we? There's tons of empty land. When I drive down Belmont or Shaw, gosh darn it. That could be, let's bring our city back, right? Stockton went bankrupt. It was because of sprawl. Fresno almost went bankrupt a few years ago. They tried to pass that Measure G, and we defended our unions there. This map was done in the context of both the city of Fresno and city of Visalia, because 3 months after the general plan of Fresno passed in the winter of 2014 and 15, Visalia followed them with similar values. Visalia historically has done concentric growth, and that's why its downtown has some sort of life in it. This map shows you the tax revenue coming to the city. It's all of these multi-use places downtown. This is Visalia, so they're downtown. Look at this. So Joe Minicozy out of Asheville, North Carolina did this analysis, and he said cities should think like farmers on revenue per acre. Wow. So this kind of mixed use on 1.9 acres is generating 558 million per acre in value. So a property tax per acre is $634,000. The Walmart, $6,500. The residential home, Minicozy's home, $20,000. Better than the Walmart. The city should want to reinvest in downtown Fresno just for tax revenue. And this is property taxes. There's sales tax going on the bottom floor as well. Wow. So it even makes economic sense. Rather than having us pay for the services, fire, sewer, everything else that's going to happen with sprawl. You can break rational arguments, but politics is not governed by reason. It's power. And people pay off politicians. Either they're stupid or there's some sort of corruption happening. Those are the only two options of why somebody would vote against the interests of their constituents. Watch what's going to happen coming up if SEDA moves forward. Whoever votes for SEDA is voting against the economic integrity of your city. Should you trust them in the future? They're thinking that they will appease the Chamber of Commerce and whoever, a few developers, because maybe I want to be a state assembly person. So I'll show the power structure because these people, you don't vote. But that money that I get from my campaign, this is the logic going on, I think. 30 by 30. So I'm going to leave the urban context of Fresno with you should fight for SEDA. It's right now, that fight, right now. I did a report. 30 by 30 was coming. The state of California's effort to conserve biodiversity, pure conservation, 30% of the land and water. I want I wanted 30 by 30 to function for poor people. So I did research. We taught farm workers how to do surveys. So farm workers were interviewing each other at remates, at soccer fields. We had a survey. We had our own youth going out and doing surveys from Valley Forward. It was published in this document, Finding Connection, Local Communities and Habitat Conservation in San Joaquin Valley. Two things I did. Any existing conservation plan, I put them all together and I mapped them. This is what it looked like. These are conventional maps of where the conservationists that aren't thinking about equity want to save. Usually it's the rivers with the most diversity. Sometimes the intersection between the mountains and the, this is Tulare County. This is Kern. We've seen these maps before. I wanted to find out what the farm workers or the unincorporated rural residents cared about. We interviewed 1,200 of them. Here's what they said. What are the problems that we're having? Concerns affecting community. Poor air quality, extreme heat, water pollution, lack of access, pesticide exposure, hunger, and poverty. Environmental problems to solve, water sustainability, increased access to green spaces, extreme heat, barriers to pesticides and chemicals, wildlife protection, food insecurity, community land ownership, flooding. What does conservation look like to you, an unincorporated resident of the San Joaquin Valley? Notice where national parks and forests come. Previously, we had done research. These folks don't get up to the mountains. This half of Tulare County in the most pristine, beautiful place. I get up there all the time. By the way, I was a ranger in Sequoia. It is beautiful. And you can just go to the giant forest. Please go to the giant forest. It is the world's cathedral. These folks aren't getting there because they don't have money. It's impenetrable. It's in English. A variety of reasons. Nature preserves also down here, rivers and wetlands, community-owned farms, combination of all of these, green areas near home, local parks. That, not huge swaths of landscape level where Kit Fox is, and I think that's great, but this is where the local residents want. They want to conserve what's near their homes. And I think they want a more integrated, like they do in Central America and in Mexico. Ejidos, the Three Sisters, intercropping, diversity, subsistence farming. You make your own salsa, and you care for the land. And you even know there's some things that we call weeds that are actually edible and medicinal. These folks know that. Green space governance. Who should be controlling these things? Local government here should be a shared responsibility. Members of the community, community organizations. Last, state and federal. This is what I want to get to. It's almost the equivalent of showing the map of North America with all the indigenous nations before the conquests and the slaughters. This is the micro level quotes of what those residents told us. They're speaking to you. They're speaking to me. That map with all the blue circling, that is a true map. This is what they were saying. Beautiful. Cerca de la escuela para los niños. Yes, every one of these making sense, right? We need to listen to them. We need a conservation. If you're looking at equity and conservation, you're doing it proximate to people who are experiencing hunger and who are in cancer zones, that want health, that want food. It's not going to look like a pure biodiversity where we put people away from the land. It's going to be extremely diverse in the systems and the methods we care for the land. And these folks are coming from sometimes indigenous places where they can teach us. Where they can teach us. The whole thing needs to be turned around. The scientists, some of them are pretty good. But these folks actually have an indigenous knowledge that goes back historically. Million years, hundreds, thousands of years. Will you maintain a nature preserve? 3/4, yes. I'll get to ejidos later, but ejido is a system of communal land sharing that came out of the Mexican Revolution. We asked, many of these people are from central Mexico, so they knew ejidos. We asked them, do you know what an ejido is? 40% said yes, 60% said no. When we described to them what an ejido was, a shared land owning where you could use the land and have access to it, would you be willing to join? Yes, 40%. So I think my math ends up in 60% total, or a majority of the folks want an ejido, right? They want something like that. A community's priorities map, similar to that density map, but the key piece here I want to show you is this. What is this yellow area around Delano and Tulare and Porterville? That's the sphere of influence of a city. That is county land that the city and the county have agreed is going to be in the city in the future, but it's not developed and it's not annexed yet. Right now, all of that land, sprawl developers are looking at that and thinking, I'm going to wait 20 years, 50 years, I'm going to bring that into. We should politicize what is already on paper changing its use from a county to the city. These could be climate buffers, green belts. Do we have a name for it? Agroecological indigenous areas. These could be the areas where they already are going to change the jurisdiction of them. Why aren't we visioning it for something other than subdivisions, right? We should start thinking more creatively like this. Briefly, food commons. Still a little bit of a heartbreak for me. There's some good rich people. I was working at American Farmland Trust. People maybe I started speaking about my book, maybe, I don't know. Program officers from foundations came down. Originally, Tom Stiers and Kat, his wife, Taylor, but most important was the Schmidt Family Foundation and 11th Hour Project. Some of these folks in the Bay Area funded pretty cool stuff. The Food Commons was an effort to have a community or regionally owned food system out of just that, community owned, including shared ownership of land and of buildings. All of the businesses, so there was going to be a land trust that was going to house the properties. We started businesses and we purchased T&D Willie's farm box, CSA, that we changed the name to Ubi out of our own backyard. The nonprofit owned 100% of the for-profit businesses, and we were then going to sell shares to the community of those businesses once they became viable. And then there was a direct public offering, or a way to gain access to more capital that I'm not going to go into, but basically an offering of ownership and stock again. Pretty complex model. After I took a look at it, I said, I'll try. Me and a woman named Karen Schmidt started it, but this is, again, ways to look at it. Here's me and Kyle Schmidt looking on Belmont Boulevard for our first store. This is a good place to look for a store. Right? Abandoned places. We've abandoned the city. We've abandoned people. We've abandoned people. We can use these places. Me and Kyle thought this was a great place, but we didn't get it. This was the team. Eventually grew. It eventually grew to we were leasing the 75-acre organic farm from the Willies. We had many employees doing quite a bit of business. We grew too fast, I think. We didn't have the infrastructure to do the accounting and all that kind of stuff. I eventually backed away because I'm thinking in the clouds and theoretically, and you just need business. The movement needs business people, MBAs, and I'm still pondering. We grew very fast. Everything was right in its theoretical frame, but there's weird things happened. We opened our businesses downtown. people would break into the trucks and steal everything. I was wondering if it's sabotage or just people looking for copper. A myriad of things like this. Getting near the end. This is the last section. Brief history of land tenure and community land trusts. So I told you I'm going to bring forward a model that is practical. Those conservation land trusts, they only are going to go so far to provide equity to our communities, resources, investment. Community land trusts are radical. They take land out of speculative markets. A community land trust is a nonprofit with equity priority. The board of directors is diverse. It promises, the land trust owns the land and it sells you the house separate from the land. So a house separate from the land is cheap, generally, right? You think of a house in Beverly Hills, the land is probably worth $1 million and the house is worth $100,000. I don't know, more than that. If you are a homeowner in a community land trust, yes, you want a $70,000 home, of course. But you might feel queasy about not having the land be part of it. And so you need to trust that nonprofit. There's a lease. Because under English common law, the property is really the land. You are leasing the improvements, the use of the land, the house, the barn, whatever. That lease is for 99 years, inheritable and renewable. 99-year inheritable renewable contract lease. That is, in effect, land ownership. And you could sell that. Usually community land trusts, if you're going to sell, they want to purchase it first because they want to sell it to another low-income person. These are designed purposely to provide equity and home ownership and vestedness. Renting, famously, is theft, right? You're paying somebody else's mortgage. You don't want to do that. But it's hard to get that first down payment. So community land trust is radical. Simple, radical, and I'm not selling you something that doesn't exist. They exist in multiple places, in fact, including here, which we'll get to in a minute. They started here. After 10 years of me pounding the table, we need community land trusts. I tried to start 2. It's hard. And then Food Commons failed, so I started just like, very simple. If you Google any community land trust, and there's probably more than 300 in the United States now, it's a global movement, you'll see little schemas like this explaining to you in simple graphs of what they do and work. So you Google community land trust, go to one, and you'll see what they're doing. Another one. I'm going to go through some history here. Just going to reference, boom, boom, boom. Boston Common. The people of Boston taxed themselves to purchase this farm that they then shared. I want to show you a history of land tenure to show you how we're in a fight between people who will privatize the life world for their own profit and us who need to share it with each other and other species and the health of the world. It's pretty brutal. Land enclosure, the famous counterframe of commons, starts in England and other places. Look at the change. The dark red is, this is from 1700 to 1850, over 50% loss of the commons to enclosure in that core part of England. You have scholars, John Locke here, saying that it makes sense to enclose the commons and to convert them into separate parcels owned by private interests. 1689. The Irish famine. Don't get me started. Henry George, this idea of taxing the land value vied with Marxism for the imagination of the progressive era globally. It's an idea that's still a time to come. The unearned, people are getting wealthy just by having the land inflate on them. George is saying tax the land itself. No taxes for everybody else. And it takes land out of speculation then, right? I need to get my head around it a little bit more. Anything with a lot of text means I'm still figuring it out. The Kauai colony. I told you about Sequoia, but what I didn't tell you was there was a group of socialists that moved here and started a colony. They built a road from a branch of the Kauai River near Three Rivers all the way up. You can walk it. It's called the Colony Mill Road. I walked it on Good Friday. I'm not too religious, but I was on Good Friday in the springtime. I walked down from the top. You're literally, every step you're taking, a super idealistic socialist had moved to the wilderness and dug with hand this road. You almost get a little misty walking that road. The idealism, the hope of something different than this extraordinary extraction that's killing the world. I will warn you, when you get to the bottom and you get near the river, the poison oak is so thick, it's like over you, and you're 18 miles in, and you're not going back uphill. You're just like, ooh. So I wouldn't recommend it too much. This is literally a picture from that road. It's a beautiful, if you walked it a little bit more in the winter, you could walk the whole thing. The Dawes Act, again, we had reservations. This law changes in 1887, telling Native peoples that you should own private property. They lose from 147 million acres in reservations in 1887 to 55 million in 1834. Kibbutz, racial justice. These next slides. In the 1950s, forever, but in the 1950s, the civil rights movement is starting to rumble. It is rumbling, it's building in the United States. People like Bayard Rustin, many others, they went to India and they went to Israel to look at the land sharing models. Kibbutz are communes. Israel is started by socialists, by the way, predominantly, a significant amount. Kibbutz, communal living, shared work, income expenses, joint collective ownership of property, democratic decision-making, equality regardless of job or position, education, children often raised by the community. The Mexican Revolution and the famous call for tierra y libertad. This is, of course, Zapata. The Mexican Constitution, 1917, Article 27, encapsulating the right to communally owned land. The ejido system that I referenced before, here I define it as an ejido is an area of communal land in which community members have a right to use and occupy land, a right that they may be passed to their heirs. We're talking about Mexican Revolution, now we're going to India, and India had a revolution, a nonviolent revolution led by Satyagraha, people dedicated to soul force or truth force. Vinoba, I can't pronounce his name, he was the first Satyagraha that Gandhi trained, and they went and asked landowners to donate land, and they did. It became so successful, they then started to create villages based on land gifting. Eventually, 160,000 Gramdan villages are established, focused on collective land ownership. Notice, these movements towards communal sharing and equity are coming from the harshest conditions. Our American South, which you'll see in a minute, the revolution, the Israelis, the Jews returning to Palestine or in Palestine. And when the civil rights workers went to Israel, they saw the emergence of the apartheid system that was very similar to what they were seeing here, and they did critique it. But these systems, these structures are interesting, the kibbutz. Tanzania, Nyeri. Tanzania was a socialist country. They started doing settlements of communally owned land and farmland. Now we're back to the United States. These civil rights workers came home and they put what they saw in India and what they saw in the Moshav and kibbutz in Israel. They started seeing that they could share land. And the first community land trust was in the American South. New Communities Incorporation, they didn't come up with a name yet, 1968. New Communities, civil rights activists associated with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives visit Israel and learn about cooperative land settlements. Upon returning to the United States, they share, quote, a new model of land tenure, begin a blueprint for new communities. New Communities purchases over 5,600 acres in Leesburg, Georgia. Right after that, they get a grant from the Economic Opportunities Commission, kind of the Great Society War on Poverty by Lyndon Johnson, and the governor of Georgia refuses to let the money be dispersed. At the same time, the USDA is not loaning to African Americans. In the 80s, many African American farmers sue the USDA. This New Communities Project fails, but they sue and win the lawsuit, and they purchased a few thousand acres in another area. So it's still going. CLT movement is underway. The publication in 1972 of the Community Land Trust, A Guide to a Model of Land Tenure in America. The first conference, National Conference on Land Reform, is held in San Francisco in '73. Paul Taylor is there and speaks. The Community Land Trust is a seminar there. Strangers and guests. By now, the Midwestern United States is falling apart. The farm crisis is there. The Catholic churches begin to advocate for land reform in small farmers in the Midwest as the suicides and the bankruptcies start unraveling. The Catholic Church. Now, usually that reference to that is pretty conservative or reactionary, but we just had that really cool Pope, and I'm hoping for Leo to do some work too. I'm going to go, you see beautiful names. Here's Bernie Sanders, 1982, Burlington, Vermont City Council appropriates $200,000 to create a new citywide CLT after early support by Mayor Bernie Sanders. First CLTs in Canada. Federal definition of community land trust introduced by Bernie Sanders in 1992. Article 27 in 1992, the Mexican Revolution, the ejido system is attacked with the support of the United States. NAFTA is happening around this time. And one of the reasons that the Zapatistas uprising in Chiapas was one one of the reasons, was this change in the ejido system. The first CLT in Kenya, 1994. Number of community land trusts in the United States, 2005, 200. 2006, National CLT Network is established. This book, the CLT City Partnership by the Lincoln Institute, is important, and if you want to learn more about CLTs, that's where you go. That's what I learned. 2010, National CLT Network is incorporated in England. 2012, first CLT in Belgium. 2013, California CLT Network is formed. I was there helping with that. 2017, Patience Milrod, the advocate attorney of Fresno, helped start the Central California Land Trust, which is a CLT. 2019, the Favela CLT Network is formed in Brazil. 2020, another publication. 2022, South Tower Community Land Trust, incorporated in Fresno. 2023, the launch of the European Land Trust Network. We're going to get to the end now. And some advice on how to start. I want to start with Madrugan. You know it? Madrugan is in the Basque region of Spain. It was founded by Jose Maria, and that is one long name. He was a priest. This was it began in the middle of the Spanish Civil War, which was vicious, and especially with the Catholic Church being chewed apart. It's currently a federation of worker cooperatives that started very small by this priest. Now it's 98 cooperatives, 8 foundations, 1 mutual fund. If you thought Food Commons was going to grow, this is what was hoped to be. 4 areas that they focus on: finance, industry, distribution, and knowledge. They have their own colleges and campuses, kind of like how labor unions do their apprentice work, except they're doing critical thinking too. Currently, Madrugan, that started in the middle of a civil war by a Catholic priest, has 70,500 workers, generated 11 billion euros in sales in 2023, has total assets of almost 25 billion euros. But it started small. You just have to start. And you start sometimes in the periphery, and sometimes the start is after a vicious, brutal fight. Sometimes in the middle of the fight. There's some bad stuff coming that we're going to have to hold together. In us holding together with what's coming, we need to build too. We need to build. We can build and resist at the same time. Okay, start small, right? How many times I talked to Kyle about CLTs? Kyle was the first person to quit his job and sign up for Food Commons. I was a consultant. I was working with American Farmland Trust at the time. Kyle was the first person to quit his full-time job and go all in, along with Jenny Sackler. Here's Kyle, who started South Tower CLT, along with maybe some people in the room. I think this is their first house, those keys. Again, nonprofit owning the land. The house is owned by these working class people. I'd love to see labor unions starting CLTs, each union. Here's South Tower, some people celebrating. Look at the diversity, just beautiful. South Tower CLT does a queer housing summit. By the way, if you're queer and your family is super religious or conservative, they sometimes boot you out. At 13 years old, just as you're figuring out your sexual identity, or you already know it, and it's different from what they want, you're homeless all of a sudden. How vulnerable. South Tower CLT is doing queer housing summits to protect those folks. Exactly what you should do in a capitalist society. Go to help the people that should be the focus of our attention are the most vulnerable, the most in need. From each according to their need, to each according to their ability. People think it's a Christian statement. It's actually a historic socialist statement. This is a land trust teaching you about what they do.
I'm a current intern here at City Farm, and before that I had no experience in gardening or growing any sort of food. I want to major in botany, and this is a great place to start learning the basics. Something that I really learned was that if you take care of the land will take care of you.
My name is Sterling Washington. I work at the Davy Lopes Recreation Center. I grew up in South Providence. I grew up in this neighborhood. We actually have about 35 kids involved in the gardening program. Without Southside Community Land Trust, none of this would have been possible. There are kids now whose eyes are open to gardening and eating right. Gardening or community gardening will spread in the city of Providence. It's already starting to.
I've been farming on and off for about 20 years, and for the past 7 years I've been farming here. Without having the support of Southside Community Land Trust, I probably would not be farming. I mean, their mission is to help people grow food, and they certainly do that. Their technical and educational support has helped me succeed and become a full-time farmer that's making a living at farming.
Without this garden, we couldn't have or get organic vegetables, and it is helping in our family.
Maybe in the future, we hope that all the community of this city, they're gonna eat from our own garden.
Southside Community Land Trust help people grow food.
The dream. A few last ones. I'm a member of the Visalia Friends meeting, Quaker. This is Bill and Beth Lovett, a great last name, Lovett. Bill was a World War II draft resistor, an anarchist that was in jail with David Dellinger, that went out and lived in a commune outside of Chicago with a print shop during the 1950s. then worked for the American Friends Service Committee and came out here and ended up helping to start or support self-help housing, self-help enterprises. But Bill himself had purchased some properties, and he purchased a 23-acre farm next to the Quia Oaks Preserve in Visalia. And the leader of the Wachumna tribe came to them and said, we used to do ceremonies here, can we use the land? He said yes, and a relationship with the Wachumna began at that time. Bill also would always say, the Europeans got it wrong. Land should have never been privatized. He literally would say it. And then what he did was, he gave it. He gave it. So we do everything, we make corporate decision making. That's my name there. A private landowner gifted the land, just like they did in India. And of course, Bill is a socialist, I would say, walking a nonviolent path. Nonviolence always connects to justice, because injustice is always going to create violence, or it is violence. Poverty is violence. Budgets are moral documents. When the police get 50% of your city budget, why are people needing to be enforced upon when there's not injustice in the society? People aren't naturally criminal. Last two slides. I wanted to leave with that little video and just leave it all happy, but I couldn't. Paul Gilmore showed us slides the other day, and Lucy Parsons was there. Who knows Lucy Parsons? Lucy Parsons was an radical American labor union leader. A wobbly, probably, anarchist. This quote by her has never left me, and when I saw I saw her name come up the other day, I always remember this. Never be deceived that the rich will allow you to vote away their wealth. And by the way, I just told you that when there was existing federal law, the rich totally gave the middle finger and did not follow the law. And in fact, right now, we have a president that's pretty lawless. So this is holding true. What does this mean for us? By the way, I am vested in voting. I once, when I was young and idealistic, didn't vote. And this elder Quaker, when I told them that, they said, why you do that? It's the easiest nonviolent thing you can do. I'm very vested in voting now. But I think we need to expand what voting means. Your real vote isn't in a ballot box every 2 or 4 years. Your real vote is with your money. Every single purchase should be politicized. Are you buying from the farmer's market? Or are you buying from God knows what, Amazon? What are you consuming? Are you a producer or a consumer? And what are you consuming on your iPad? Are you producing knowledge? Are you producing community by organizing? Just like Dylan is putting together these empowerment institutes. We need to be producers. And one part of production is voting to be together. As diverse as we can hold each other tightly. And help each other heal, by the way. A lot of people hurting. A lot of epigenetic pain, especially from indigenous people, especially from African Americans. Imagine genocides and slavery, hundreds of years. We're going to have to heal together as we move forward. So, take it with a grain of salt. Lucy Parsons, I'm principally nonviolent. She wasn't. Last one. So I couldn't end with Lucy. I wanted to end with Ernesto Galarza. I often present to youth, and often very diverse students of color in the Valley. God knows what they think when they see me, but I read them this. Ernesto Galarza was born in 1910 in Mexico. No, 1905. He immigrates to California in 1910. He was a farm worker. He became a leader at a very young age just because he knew a few words of English, did every job under the sun, ends up going to Occidental College, where Barack Obama actually went first before transferring out. He got his master's at Stanford, and Ernesto Galarza goes on to get his PhD at Columbia. And what does he do after he finishes his PhD at Columbia? He comes to the San Joaquin Valley, and he picks a fight. He becomes a union organizer, and he picks a fight with the biggest agribusiness around Arvin, California that you can find. And then for the next 12 years, he fights. He fights. So the book he put together at the end of his life, and this is what I'm reading from, this snippet comes from A Burning Light, Action and Organizing in the Mexican-American Community in California. I'm going to leave you with Ernesto Galarza. It's still not totally cheery and optimistic, but I'm sure you know that the fight that's coming is not going to be easy. He's talking to students, Berkeley students. I reacted with intense interest to a remark that was made this morning that one of the difficulties of the Mexican-American community is that it has not pinpointed the enemy. I ought to tell you that some 15 or 20 years ago, more than that perhaps, I asked myself the very same question. I had been working and living with farm workers in this state and had moved with them up and down the state for many years, coming at last to the conclusion that one of our difficulties was that we had not defined the target. Who was the enemy? I spent some 10 years of my life in an experiment. What happens to a Mexican-American community and those who presume to lead it? And when he says Mexican-American community, you can put your identity as a woman, as a Hmong, as a Punjab. He's arguing for the disenfranchised or the dispossessed to organize. At least that's how I take it. What happens to a Mexican-American community and those who presume to lead it when they do pinpoint the enemy? And we did. I helped to organize some 20 locals of farm workers in this state from Yuba City to the Mexican border. It was our continuous effort not only to organize the farm workers, but to try to help them to understand where the enemy was. I think we succeeded. In fact, the best evidence that we succeeded is that we were so thoroughly destroyed. He's a tough guy. In some 10 years of what I like to call dynamic research, and someone can tell me if somebody has thought of this before, and by this I mean in areas of social experience where information is awfully hard to get because it's so closely guarded, the only way to get it is to go out and not ask for the information, but to challenge those who are keeping it to themselves. And in California, it became obvious to me that the way to get at understanding why farm labor was so exploited and lived so miserably in 100 hamlets in this state, the way to get at it was to engage the enemy. So we organized with the purpose of taking down a peg or two, the power of the Associated Farmers of California, of the banks and insurance companies who have very high investments in agriculture, of other institutions that carry a role in the background as investors and manipulators of wealth. Step by step, in a series of strikes, we challenged that power. We named institutions, we named persons, we named places. Through the years, a picture unfolded, but to the degree that we did define the opposition grew in strength and determination to destroy the Union, and it did destroy the Union. I want to warn every Mexican American who thinks of himself or herself as a leader, before he or she puts together an organization of any kind that is going after specific targets of power, I want to warn him or her they're asking for some pretty rough treatment. One of the things we found out, for instance, was that the agencies of government, and they aren't not the Mexican-American agencies, they're not inventions of the Mexican peasant to come to this country. We know that, right? NAFTA drove those folks off their land, North American Free Trade Agreement. The agencies of state and federal power were conniving, collaborating, and conspiring with the economic power structure to destroy the Union, and they did. So out of the book, Ernesto Galarza did a tactic that I try to model occasionally, is if you want to figure out where the power structure is, you jab them in the nose and try to see if they're going to wail on you and see how they hit you. That hasn't, the book itself was an endeavor to, it's a massive slug in the nose, but people have to read it and organize around it. And even if not, the book is an artifact there to be found, just like I found As You Sow at the end of my time at UC Davis, and something embeds in you. That saying, they didn't bury, they thought they buried you, but we were seeds, right? So the book is there. This story of fighting and the glimmers of both building alternative structures that are communal, common, socialist, social, that's there for us now to build in these peripheries, like the South Tower of the city of Fresno with a queer housing summit. But we're also going to be resisting and doing that together. The book is there. Donna's in the back if there's a few copies left. I want to thank Dylan. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you.